Hi guys, we're continuing with US and world history in the last 500 years in a nutshell. Say hi, Ruben.
Hello.
So we were continuing, this is the third part. Go ahead.
Imperialism factors. Economic access to natural resources, markets, military control of ports for sea voyages, air flights, refueling stations, political spreading systems or institutions, religious spreading specific faith, cultural, racial bias toward or against different cultures.
In 1898, the US fought the Spanish-American War because Spain was mistreating Cuba, so US took over Spain's colonies. Cuba, which is 90 miles off of Florida's coast, was now under US control, and the US built a navy base after they freed Cuba from Spain. The same was done with Puerto Rico, Philippines, Guam, and however, U.S. did not grant them independence.
In the 1913, the U.S. was involved in the European War, World War One. This included the Allies, which Great Britain, Russia, France, and U.S., while the Axis, or so-called Central Powers, were Germany, Austria, Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire.
During the first 3 years of World War One, the U.S. held back from participating, and later on, after U.S. ships started being sunk by Germany in 1917, U.S. joined the Allied forces. In November 1918, the Allied forces defeated the Central Powers.
In 1929, the Great Depression, a serious economic turndown, began worldwide. In Europe, the economic problems led to the rise of fascism, squelching democracy, and advocating the takeover of other nations.
In 1933, at the height of the Depression, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt instituted federal programs like the New Deal, which were intended for lowering unemployment. From 1933 to 1937, unemployment was reduced by 11%. Unemployment rose in 1937 by 5%. And then from 1938 through 1945, unemployment decreased by 20% to non-existent pre-depression levels. Um, okay.
In the mid 1930s, Germany began attacking smaller nations in Europe. Italy fought to take over Ethiopia in Africa. Japan attacked China. Germany joined Italy and Japan, forming the Axis powers.
So by 1939, war broke out between the Axis, which was again Germany, Italy, and Japan, and the Allies, which was Great Britain, um, mm, and Russia and U.S. Um, so so in 1941. The U.S. joined the war because Japanese were bombing the Hawaiian naval base, and they caused the U.S. to start fighting in Europe, Africa, and Asia.
The war consisted in horrific battles, fire bombing of cities, the Holocaust dropping of two atomic bombs on Japan, resulting in massive destruction across Europe and parts of Asia. In 1945, the Allies were victorious, and following the war, scourged nations were rebuilt.
The Cold War started after World War II ended, and this was between mostly the Russia and the United States. Well, this was between the capitalistic and the communist nations mostly. Um, this was a power struggle which was intended to avoid direct fighting, even though it did include numerous smaller conflicts. But they were trying to avoid the threat of nuclear war between two superpowers of the US and the Soviet Union, two continents. The conflicts included in the 50s the Korean War, Um, then 54 to 75, the Vietnam War, where non-communist South Vietnam was aided by the U.S. The conflict ended in 75 when U.S. left from Vietnam and the communists took over.
In 1991, the Cold War ended. The Soviet Union broke up, and communism ended there. Even through Mikhail Gorbachev tried to reform the communist government. However, the loosening of control led to the collapse of these governments in Eastern Europe, accompanied by the taking down of Berlin Wall, separating East and West Germany. After this, politics became more unpredictable.
In the 50s, in the second half of the 20th century, social change resulted in concerns over fairness and upholding of civil rights. These included civil rights to different groups of immigrants, ending segregation, discrimination, public schools and facilities getting integrated, new laws being enforced to ensure voting, and laws against racial and cultural discrimination.
Technology advances in computer science, medicine were meant to take and make life and jobs easier and more productive. Advance allowed more ease to creating new things as well as improving the global transmitting of information.
Not controlling technology and being careful with its uses, however, could potentially lead to pollution of air, water, and land. And the lack of consciousness could lead to piling of wastes and trash due to endless burning of fossil fuels, etc. This is a summary. So that was the bulk of the info. We have some years here. In the 1800s, Cherokee Indians adopted agriculture with corn as their major crop.
In 1540, Europeans first visited Cherokee villages.
In 1700, white settlers clashed with Cherokees over land and possession in the South, mostly.
In the 1800s, the Cherokee adopted white farming methods, religion, and lifestyle aspects of white culture.
1820, the Cherokee developed written language used to this day. 1838, Cherokee forced to give up lands in the South and move to the West, driven off their ancestral lands as mandated by President Andrew Jackson in 1830, who claimed that U.S. government would be able to protect the Cherokee from whites and would try to take their lands, would not try to take their lands in the West. We're going to continue in the next part. Thank you, guys.